Hi, I'm Andrew with Investors Hub, and let's do our quick introduction, then we'll get right to the interview. We're going to be talking with Dan Caplinger. He's a contributing analyst at the Motley Fool, and we're going to be talking about the Aphria and Tilray merger and about the cannabis industry in general. So we'll have our quick disclaimer, chapter points, and then the interview. Please note that our videos are not designed to be direct investing advice. We're here to gather the perspective of different investors. Our channel and our content should just be one stop on the journey of trying to find out where to put your money. So in your article, you mentioned an interesting disconnect between Aphria and Tilray. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so basically last week we saw shares of Tilray really go through the roof. Shares of Aphria, on the other hand, did not go up as much. And that was an interesting disconnect because the two companies are actually going through a merger process right now. And so under the terms of that merger, once the two companies combine, Tilray shareholders should be able to keep their shares intact, but Aphria shareholders will lose their Aphria stock. Instead, they will get Tilray stock instead. And the ratio of that, it's a 0.8381 share ratio, so that if you own 100 shares of Aphria, you're going to get a little bit less than 84 shares of Tilray. Usually in these merger situations, those two values kind of track with each other, so that if Tilray goes up, Aphria goes up about the same amount. If they go down, they usually go down about the same amount. But that did not happen last week. And so we got a really big price disconnect. Basically, when Tilray was trading at its highest level of the week, Aphria shares traded at roughly a 50% discount to where you would have expected them to trade based on those merger talks. And so that was what the basis was for my suggestion that, if you like that merger, if you like the prospects for those companies going forward, then the play would have been to buy shares of Aphria. Potentially, you could even sell short shares of Tilray. That would have been a more risky situation, but for those who like the idea of the cannabis merger, it was a lot cheaper to play it using Aphria stock than it would have been using Tilray stock.
So the price of Tilray has since changed. Do you think that short play is still around or no?
So, just to be clear on this paired trade situation, the idea behind it is that you make money by owning the one stock and then selling short the other. So in some ways, you don't care which way the stocks move as long as that disconnect narrows. And so, when Tilray stock fell last week, it fell more than Aphria did. So it closed up that discount. It's not 50% anymore. But based on the Friday closing prices, there's still about a 30% discount buying Aphria shares rather than buying Tilray's shares. And so if you believe that merger is going to go through, and it's not a sure thing at this point, if you think it's going to go through, then yes, there is still a profit opportunity to be made if you buy Aphria shares and you sell Tilray shares short. The caveat being that sometimes it's hard to actually do that transaction. It's sometimes you can't get Tilray shares. You can't borrow them in order to sell them short. Sometimes you can get them, but you have to pay a really big fee in order to borrow them from somebody. That can eat into the potential profits. In addition, some brokers aren't allowing you to do the sorts of transactions that you would ordinarily be able to do, just because there's been so much disruption lately with these short squeezed stocks that we've seen. There's always the potential that Tilray would turn into one of those, and you could be in a situation where your broker would essentially prevent you from taking advantage of this potential opportunity.
So cannabis has been in a rally since mid-January, but we saw a massive pop last week. What do you think caused that?
So I think that, since January, we've had a couple of things happen that not everybody was expecting to happen. In the U.S. Senate, we had both Democratic candidates for Senate in the state of Georgia win their respective special elections. And that made the U.S. Senate go 50-50 between the two parties. And that gives the vice president the tie-breaking vote. That was seen as generally favorable for cannabis because cannabis legislation to decriminalize it at the federal level has been something that in a Republican-controlled Congress was seen as a non-starter. In a democratically controlled Congress, odds are better that that sort of legislation is going to go through. As far as what kind of sparked more interest in the past week, we started to see some movement in Washington towards trying to make those things happen. We've also seen some events happen at the state level. More and more states are looking at legalizing marijuana either for recreational purposes or for medical purposes. And then just sort of generally, I think that individual investors are becoming more attuned to individual company opportunities in areas that they are familiar with. A lot of people are aware of the increased availability of cannabis, and maybe they live in a state where it's been recently legalized, and so getting a chance to tap into that in their stock portfolio seems to be something that people are thinking about more and more.
So, are there any other interesting companies in the cannabis sphere you've been watching?
So it's interesting because I generally steer clear of the cannabis cultivation companies. I see them generally, they're doing their best. Companies like Aphria, like Tilray, Aurora Cannabis, Canopy Growth, some of the big names in the industry really do their best. They try to create brands. They try to distinguish their products from those of their competitors. But I'm not a consumer of the product, but I'm not quite sure. A lot of people see these products essentially as commodities. And so it can be kind of difficult to establish this sort of premium brand awareness that allows you, it gives you pricing power, it gives you that sort of thing. So instead of using those pure play cannabis stocks, what I tend to look at are the companies that are helping those cannabis cultivators go into business, expand their business. And one company that I particularly like, it's called Innovative Industrial Properties. The ticker's IIPR. And basically what they do, they are a real estate investment trust that has specialized in procuring property for cannabis businesses. Basically, if you want to open a cannabis business, even in states where they're legal, there's a ton of state-specific regulations that you usually have to comply with. You can't just go to a regular real estate agent and say, hey, I want to open up a marijuana shop. Can I rent that space down the street? There's a whole bunch of extra stuff to do. Innovative Industrial Properties knows in and out sort of the rules that apply to that. They've got operations in more than a dozen states. They work with some pretty big companies in the industry. They work with those partners so that, they can either sell you a property outright, or what often happens is Industrial Innovative Properties owns the actual property. They lease it out to the cannabis company. That's good for the cannabis company because they usually don't have a whole lot of money on hand. It's cheaper for them. It's good for Innovative Industrial Properties because that gives them a consistent flow of income. That leads to a pretty high dividend yield. They've been raising their dividends pretty much, almost every quarter since they came out. They've been out for a few years now, and the stock price has really gone through the roof. I see a whole bunch of growth potential there just because, especially if you start legalizing marijuana at the federal level, there's plenty of opportunity for new entrepreneurs to come into the area, and they're going to be great. They're going to gravitate to a company like Innovative Industrial Properties to kind of help themselves get set up in a way that works financially and also meets all those regulatory requirements.
Any additional thoughts?
I just, the thing that I would caution investors in cannabis right now to keep in mind is that the sector is extremely volatile right now. There's a whole bunch of things going on. There's news items coming out every day. Each individual company has its strengths and weaknesses. And while it's often the case that you'll see stocks move kind of in lockstep. The whole sector will go up or down on a given day. That's not always going to be the case. Oftentimes we can see situations where one particular company will execute better or worse, and those stocks, the good performing folks will get rewarded. The ones that execute poorly kind of, get taken out to the woodshed. And so it's something for investors. If you're just getting into this space, yes, there's a lot of potential here, but there's also a lot of risk. And so you need to be really careful about overcommitting your investment capital to this sector. Just be sure that you're careful and you take into account that risk. And I wish everybody in the sector the best of luck.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like the channel. It really helps us grow, and it's the best thing you could do for us. And I'll see you again soon.